Hi, welcome back. Since 3.0 is right around the corner, just a few short weeks away, I thought we'd do something I did right before 2.0 almost a year ago, and make a tier list of every Star Rail character for 3.0. It's going to include all characters from 1.0 to 3.0. Yes, Fugue isn't out yet, but we do know everything she's going to do and everything about her kit. I'm sure after she releases, the community is going to find a couple ways to use her that I don't mention today, but I'm pretty sure my ranking is going to be pretty solid. I also know Aglaé and Herta aren't out yet, they just got changed today and I had to change the rankings according to the changes, but from what we know so far, they won't be changed too much more. Before we start, you should like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this in the future, and join the Express Right Discord server for a community filled with discussions just like this one. We're only 100 away from 3,000 subs, it would be cool if we could get that before the end of the year. Now let's get onto it. First things first, as usual, the rules. All 5-star units are going to be at E0 S1, and all 4-star units are at E6 with their best 4-star light cone at S5. There are going to be 8 tiers, the first of which is SS tier must pull units, reserved for limited 5-star units that not only do you absolutely have to pull to have a great account, but who you may also want to consider eidolons for, even if we're only talking about E0 S1 units here. Then we have SS tier insane premium units, which is reserved for units that aren't exactly must pulls, but more so premium units that you should get after you already have a foundation composed of the units that are in SSS tier. S tier must build 4 stars and standard 5 stars, or limited 5 stars that are worth 180 pulls, which is pretty self-explanatory. A tier for really good units that you won't regret building or pulling. Then the bad tiers for bro fell off, who, what, and why. By the way, these tiers aren't exactly better or worse. When a character is above another, that doesn't mean they have more or less value. The descriptions of these tiers are pretty descriptive. Just because Moza is above Fugue, for example, doesn't mean Moza is better. It just means that he's a must-build 4-star unit and she's not a must-build 4-star unit because she's not a 4-star unit.
Sure about that?
Without further ado, let's start. We're going to brush over the bad tiers really quickly first. The Y tier consists of characters that would make someone ask, why are you using them? Pretty self-explanatory. The What tier consists of units that are kinda useless in today's meta, and the Who tier consists of characters that became pretty forgotten. While some people swear by Sustain Welt, he's pretty bad and using him as really cope. Just because God Doggos could use him effectively, doesn't mean you can. God Doggos is God Doggos. Wyatt Sky might use Sway pretty effectively too, but again, you probably can't. Wyatt Sky is Wyatt Sky. Blade could become a little better in 3.1 when Truby comes out, but I'm not holding out much hope for him. The Bro Fell Off tier requires a little bit more explanation though, but it's also pretty obvious. All these 1.x DPSs fell off pretty hard the more HP inflation got worse. You're not going to have an easy time clearing with the current MOC with E0 S1 teams with these units. It also became grossly obvious that Kafka is pretty mid without a strong DOT support. It's also speculated that the next DOT character that comes out may power creep Kafka by having stronger DOTs than her and detonating DOTs with a stronger multiplier than Kafka or more often, using a follow-up attack or something. However, if the next DOT support makes DOT great again without power creeping Kafka, then depending on how strong the buff is, she may climb back to S or even SS. Some people may disagree with Ratio being this low, but he got insanely power crept by Fei Xiao. Those who have Robin most likely have Fei Xiao as well. There's no reason to use Ratio over her. Clara got power crept by Yun Li, and Mono Quantum is completely dead in the water. We definitely need a really strong Quantum support, which may come as Truby in 3.1, so I hold out a bit of hope for that. Gwenifin is in the Bro Fell Off tier, but she didn't really fall off at all. I just thought she'd fit in what's supposed to be the B tier. She didn't fall off when DOT fell off because she's actually a really great F2P Acheron support alongside Pella. She's not super powerful and doesn't have a debuff like Jiaozhou's that would give Acheron extra stacks, but she does work pretty well for F2P players and definitely works pretty damn well for me. The first character in the really good or A tier is Fugue. Some people may have expected her higher, some may have expected her lower. The thing with Fugue is, the most obvious role for her is to replace Harmony MC, while they're busy being Remembrance MC when you switch over to playing the new meta but still have Super Break 5-star DPSs that you want to use. The problem is, Harmony MC is basically already perfect. With Firefly, Fugue is ever so slightly better than Harmony MC. I actually thought she was a little worse, but then when writing the script I looked it up, and they're mostly the same, but with her LC, Fugue becomes considerably better, and we're discussing everyone E0 S1 here. With Rappa and Boothill, then Fugue is a lot better than Harmony MC, and enough to actually allow Rappa and Boothill to actively compete with Firefly, rather than being slightly worse than her depending on the situation. Boothill is still a lot worse in multi-target scenarios even with Fugue, but he is definitely better. Boothill wasn't a super break unit exactly, but now he kinda is. Fugue also has a couple different applications outside of super break, like when using her with Acheron. Acheron and Jiaoqiu, along with Fugue, who would use her skill on Adventurine, is one of the best E0 Acheron teams in the game because of how quickly they generate stacks, but only when enemies attack so much that they make Adventurine's FUAs proc more often. I haven't seen any comparisons between her and Pella, but how often enemies attack is definitely a huge factor when it comes to that team. The only problem is how low Fugue's def reduction actually is at only 18%. This team is also very premium. You could use Linksha instead of Aventurine since both of them do many FUAs, and Linksha's version isn't actually dependent at all on the amount of enemy attacks. However, it's still 4 or 5 stars in one single team, which is pretty damn expensive. It's definitely an option though. You can also use her with Himiko to make her really good against all fire weak enemies, and that's the thing I'm mostly excited for when it comes to Fugue, and part of the reason why Me1 is wanting her. There are definitely some more teams I haven't thought about that the community will, but when thinking about the summon meta Remembrance and how Super Break is definitely gonna fall off, then aside from Acheron with Aventurine, and if you're really dedicated to Firefly, Rappa, or Boothill, I really don't see Fugue as a very wise pull meta-wise, especially since Sunday is on the banner, and, well, we'll get to him later. So she's really good, but if I was 100% thinking about the meta, I really wouldn't pull for her. You're definitely not gonna regret it, but it's wiser to pull for Sunday. If Sunday was a pretty lady, just like she was, I would have definitely pulled for him over her, but right now, fluffy pretty lady E1 S1 takes priority. I'm going to put Remembrance MC in really good as well, as they're definitely not must builds for the summon meta, unless you're missing vital supports. They're definitely a great choice though, and as the tier name suggests, really good. There are just better options out there for the Remembrance meta. However, they are very useful with the Herda, as they are part of her best F2P team which can actually clear impressively quickly. Just like Fugue, I'm sure the community as a whole will find some great team comps of them that beta testers haven't yet, so they're definitely more up to debate. I'm going to keep them in the really good tier because so far they're just really good. Now I was going to put Harmony MC in this tier as well, mostly because of the same reasons I put Fugue here. Super Break is definitely gonna fall off and is going to become a niche playstyle. And no, there aren't going to be any Remembrance Break DPS units, at least not for a very long time. And by then Fugue would probably rerun with them anyway when Sunday isn't on the banner, when it's wiser to pull her. And you'd still have Harmony MC to use with them anyway. It's just incredibly unlikely they release any Remembrance Break units because, as I've said for like 4 or 5 videos so far, in 3.1 we're going to be getting Hula and the Apocalyptic Shadow, who will be immune to getting Weakness Broken and Super Break damage. All that taken into account though, Harmony MC is still Harmony MC. They've created a whole meta, and even if Super Break does fall off, I still put Rappa and Firefly in SS tier, who are the best Super Break DPS units in the game. And they're completely free. You'd lose basically nothing if you did build them, and you'd only gain a ton of free damage, so they're definitely must builds. I just gotta sprinkle in a little Super Break hate and say that they are insanely boring. I put Jade in this tier as well for being Herda's best premium support aside from Robin. She's not an insane must build, especially because Small Herda is also quite insane as a support for Big Herda, but she's definitely really good still. I put Black Swan in this tier because she's pretty damn good for Acheron, but she's definitely the lowest value out of any of the units in this tier, unfortunately. I put her way higher than Kafka though, because when we get the next DOTs aboard, Black Swan is going to stay as the best DOT DPS unit because of how perfect her kit is for DOT. She can do hundreds of thousands of damage if she had the right support. She for sure has a bright future, it just has to be the correct future. If Hoyo ends up completely neglecting DOT and not bringing it back whatsoever, the Black Swan is definitely going to be going into the bro fell off tier. There's definitely still hope for her though. Luocha is also in this tier because he's just a really good healer. Not a must pull, just quite good. Sparkle and Bronya are both in this tier as well. Sparkle got insanely power crept by Sunday. She's not unusable, but she's just nowhere near as good as he is. She's really good, but she's not a must pull or must build because Sunday exists. Bronya is only in this tier because she's in almost every single Zero Cycle Sustainless video you've ever watched, but she's also going to get replaced by Sunday probably. However, she is great with Boothill, and even if Sunday is slightly better than her with Boothill because he gives energy to Boothill, it's only once every couple of turns and Boothill's ultimate isn't insanely detrimental to his kit. Sunday can be used elsewhere for sure, while Bronya can stay with Boothill, who as we know is the most versatile single target boss killer in the game. Moving on to the S tier with must build 4-star and standard 5-star units, or limited 5 stars that you really won't regret pulling and who are definitely worth it. First is Aglaia, who's the first Remember's DPS. In my previous video about her, I mentioned she might become a standard unit, but that has been completely disproven. From what we know, she's definitely staying as a limited 5-star unit. She is, as I just mentioned, the first Remember's DPS, and she's definitely pretty damn good. She's nowhere near as good as Acheron, for example, and especially after she got nerfed just today, but she's still pretty good. You're going to beat content pretty easily with her, and you can definitely still zero cycle with her with a premium team and some strategy. I put her in this tier instead of the SS premium units tier because she heavily relies on Sunday, and so will basically every single Remember's unit. If she didn't rely so hard on Sunday, she definitely would have been in the SS tier, so as this tier suggests, you won't regret pulling for her, but she's not quite as good as the units in the tier above. Moza and Hunt March 7th are definitely must-build units because of how plain good they are. The best thing about them is how they're the best Fei Xiao supports, but they're definitely not stuck to Fei Xiao. You can actually probably use these two together pretty effectively. I've seen some great clears of Moza going solo, and since I don't have Fei Xiao, I've also seen March prove that she doesn't use Fei Xiao as a crutch to prove how great she is. Moza can easily do 50k to 100k per follow-up attack. He does when using him with Robin. He gives Fei Xiao 40 crit damage at E2 and 25% FUA damage, and of course all the stacks she needs. March does 200 to 250k damage per enhanced basic attack, and you can do as many basic attacks when using her with a unit that frequently attacks, especially like Fei Xiao of course. She gives 36% break effect and 60% crit damage to her master. Honestly, that's really sweet of her. I know you have March 7th and you can pick Moza as a 4-star in the current event. They're definitely must-build 4-star units. So is Gallagher. He's the goat of 4-star abundance units. He's pretty much a 4-star equivalent of Luocha, just a toned-down kit version that just does a lot more damage when using him in super break teams. You most likely have him. He's definitely a must-build unit. Himiko and Herda are here as well. They're a standard 5-star unit and 4-star unit respectively that acts pretty similar, and they're both very powerful. Himiko is going to get a lot more powerful when Fugue comes out, but she's not going to be an insane premium unit because she's not a premium unit and will still definitely require pretty specific scenarios to be super powerful. She's also a great big Herda support, but only when enemies have both fire and ice weaknesses. Small Herda is also a great big Herda support, and honestly, I just love that. Mother and child, or master and puppet, I guess. They're going to destroy everything with ice weakness together. I also don't have to tell you about how trivial Small Herda and Himiko make pure fiction, which gets even more trivial when using Jade with them and will become even more trivial when using Big Herda. They're not going to be exactly as good as Jade is for Big Herda, but since they're not a limited 5-star unit, they're in this tier. Pella, as we know, is the best 4-star support for Acheron, who is either the best or second best or third best DPS in the game depending on who you ask, so she's in the must-build tier. Tingyun definitely fell off for a while, but in 3.0, when Remembrance comes out, she's going to become a lot better because Remembrance characters are going to need a lot of energy, and Tingyun is going to provide that energy. She's also just useful anywhere where your characters need energy. She's great, you probably got her, you should definitely build her. Jingyuan definitely became worth it after Sunday, but he is, as is the case with Black Swan, a lot lower value than anyone else in this tier, especially Aglaia. He's nowhere near as good as Aglaia, actually, it's just that Jingyuan pullers don't regret pulling him anymore because of Sunday. He's definitely going to be useful basically everywhere Aglaia is useful, who is basically useful everywhere Acheron is useful. So while I definitely wouldn't pull for his current rerun or any future rerun and would go for Aglaia instead, he's no longer completely useless. Let him have this win. I was considering putting him in A tier instead of S, but some people are really adamant on comparing him to Acheron, even though I know he's nowhere near as good as Acheron, so for those people, I'll put him in S tier for you guys. Now let's move on to the fun stuff, SS insane premium units. First off, Linksha. I really wasn't expecting her cleansing and healing to be as insane as it is. I've never felt more comfortable than when playing with Linksha. She even kept me alive in Diverging Universe 8 with barely any sustain blessings. Gotta love her for that. She's got AoE cleansing that she doesn't even have to be awake for. She herself can be CC'd, yet Banui bounces and blows up just to wake its mother up. Her healing is also really strong. As I said, I've never felt more comfortable than when playing with her, and I have Fu Xuan. So she's an insane premium unit. Jiaoqiu is too, and as I said in a previous video, he definitely proved me wrong. I was one of the first to jump on his 8 bandwagon, and I was completely wrong. I still f***ing hate his design though. Of course, he's Acheron's best support as he gives her lots of extra damage, which is actually a little bit less than Pella's 56% defense shred when she has pearls, but because of the extra stacks that he provides, Acheron becomes so much better and clears everything so much faster. When Acheron was inarguably the best DPS, the difference between Jiaoqiu and Pella wasn't as pronounced, but now when Acheron needs to take any little power up she can get to be relevant, Jiaozhou definitely proved his worth. He's a pretty insane premium unit. Wowo is also going to be incredibly powerful when Remembrance comes out because of her energy regeneration. She definitely doesn't have as good sustainability as Lingsha does, or as Fushuan does, or as anyone else does, but her energy regeneration is going to make her Remembrance team so much more effective. Fushuan is also here, who some people really think fell off, but she's completely fine where she is. Some may argue she's only S instead of SS, but there are barely any situations where there's so much AoE damage she just f***ing dies. Which is the main complaint about her. She's still pretty great as a sustain unit, but I'd say Lingsha is ever so slightly better at sustaining, and Huohuo has ever so slightly better utility, and Aventurine is just a lot better than everybody else. Yunli is here because she's really good against basically everything physical weak, and if you pull her and invest into her, you definitely won't regret it, though she also heavily relies on enemies that attack constantly, which is what really lit her spark when Hulei came out and made everyone realize that, hey, she's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Topaz is here because she's Fei Xiao's best support, aside from Robin, 50% FUA damage, lots of personal damage, and insane attack generation from our big booty debt collector. She's not a must-pull because Moza and March exist, but she's definitely an insane premium unit. Firefly, Boot Hill, and Rappa are all in this tier as well. I was going to put them lower, but as far as the devs will go to phase out Super Break, they're still not going to be entirely useless. You have two teams. Boot Hill is probably still going to be the most versatile boss killer in the game, Rappa will still be insanely powerful, and because of Fugue, these two will truly compete with Firefly, who will definitely still be pretty powerful as well. Do I expect them to get power crept to hell like Jingliu and Dan Heng? Hell no. Do I expect them to get slightly phased out and possibly fall out of the top 5 DPS list due to enemies becoming resistant to break? Yes, and do I expect them to be less effective than Remembrance units during the 3.x period? Also definitely yes. Finally, we are at the absolute must-pulls or SSS tier. Robin, Ruanmei, and Sunday are of course here because they are the absolute best supports in the game. As the name of the tier suggests, they are absolute must-pull units. Sunday is definitely less so because if you're not going to pull summons or play traditional hyper carry, he's going to be way less useful for you, but because he's so insanely by far the best harming unit for Remembrance, he's going to stay here. We already know how powerful Robin and Ruanmei are. Robin is obviously the best, buffing up every single team in the game with Ruanmei following closely behind, and you need both, not just one of them, because you have to build two teams. Aventurine is also here because we already know he's by far the best sustain in the game. He has infinite sustainability, unlike Fushuan, who could die from strong enough AoE attacks, even if they are rare as we said. Does many FUAs, which make him very useful with Fei Xiao and with Fugue in an Acheron team, and gives 50% effect rest to all allies. He's not as much a must-pull as all these other units, especially if you already have 2 limited sustains, but I would definitely always consider getting Aventurine. Just not in this timeline, I'll keep skipping him. We talked about the herd a bit already, but let's talk about her some more. She's going to be an insane DPS. Her multipliers were already pretty great, but she actually got buffed today too. Unlike Aglaia, who, as we said, got nerfed. The buff is actually the reason I put her in triple S rather than double S. It changed a lot, honestly. We thought she was going to be just another pure fiction character, but it turns out she's pretty good basically everywhere. She doesn't even need to be in AoE scenarios, as she does pretty good single target damage as well. I'd say you can compare the ratio of her AoE attacks to single target attacks to that of Acheron's. Acheron, as we know, is insane in AoE scenarios and still powerful, but definitely a lot weaker in single target scenarios. The Herda is going to be absolutely broken in Ice Weak AoE scenarios, and she's going to be pretty good in Ice Weak single target scenarios. Even though there is nothing in her kit that would make her perform better against non-Ice Weak units, like how Acheron, for example, has a free 20% all-type resistance penetration, which gives her 0 net disadvantage against non-lightning weak enemies, but she's still going to be one of the most insane DPS in the game. Some people are going to tell you she's better than Acheron, some people are not. She's going to be insane. She's going to be pretty damn good. You will regret investing into her and her teams pretty heavily. It's also worth mentioning that her F2P teams are a lot more powerful than Acheron's F2P teams. Finally, the 2 best DPSs in the history of the game are also here. The answer is always going to change based on who you ask, again, so let's just say it's equal to not hurt anybody's feelings. You guys can hash it out in the comments maybe. Obviously, they can deal with every single scenario in the game. Fei Xiao is just weaker than most units in pure fiction, which is fine because you'd still have Acheron for one side, then Himiko and Herda for the other side since they're fewer units. It's also fun because Acheron is also slightly weaker in Apocalyptic Shadow when the boss is single target rather than AoE like the current cycle has. They do way more damage than every other DPS unit in the game with their best teams and can clear every mode in the game with their best teams. Fei Xiao, Big Herda, and Acheron, who is the best DPS units in the game? The answer is always going to change depending on who you ask. Some people will say Acheron is better, some people will say Big Herda is better. I say when it comes to these three, you can genuinely just choose whichever two you want, or you can choose even just one and then pick another DPS from the SS or S tiers, and you will have a great time. This game is pretty damn easy. And that is it. Let me know what you think and what would you change in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe for more content like this in the future. Join the Express Friend Discord server for a community where you can find more discussions just like this one. Thank you again, and I will see you next time.